Om Ajnanatimidandasya Jnananjana Shalakaya Chakshurunmilitam Dhena Tasmai Shri Gurave Namah. We read the other day about how Caitanya Mahaprabhu wears sandalwood bracelets, and Poonam sent some sandalwood bracelets. So we have these for Caitanya Mahaprabhu, thanks to Poonam and Guru down in Southern California. We're reading from the Sri Brahma Samhita starting at text 24. Then the goddess of learning Saraswati, the divine consort of the Supreme Lord, said thus to Brahma, who saw nothing but gloom in all directions, O Brahma, this mantra, namely, Kling Krishnaya Govindaya Gopi Janabalabhaya Swaha, will assuredly fulfill your heart's desire. Purport: the mantra, consisting of the 18 divine letters prefixed by the Kama Bij, is alone super excellent. It has a twofold aspect. One aspect is that it tends to make the pure soul run after all attractive Sri Krishna, the Lord of Gokula, and the divine milkmaids. This is the acme of the spiritual tendency of jivas. When the devotee is free from all sorts of mundane desires and willing to serve the Lord, he attains the fruition of his heart's desire, namely the love of Krishna. But in the case of the devotee who is not of unmixed aptitude, this super excellent mantra fulfills his heart's desire also. The transcendental Kama Bija is inherent in the divine logos located in Gokula, Goloka, and the Kama Bija, pervertedly reflected in the worldly affairs, satisfies all sorts of desires of this mundane world. Text 25. O Brahma, do thou practice spiritual association by means of this mantra, then all your desires will be fulfilled. Purport. Its purport is clear. Brahma, being desirous of satisfying Govinda, practiced the cultural acts for Krishna in Goloka, Lord of Shweta-dweep, for a long time. His meditation ran thus: there exists a divine lotus of 1,000 petals, augmented by millions of filaments in the transcendental land of Goloka. On its whirl there exists a great divine throne on which is seated Sri Krishna, the form of eternal effulgence of transcendental bliss, playing on his divine flute, resonant with the divine sound, with his lotus mouth. He is worshipped by his amorous milkmaids with their respective subjective portions and extensions, and also by his external energy, who stays outside, embodying all mundane qualities. Purport. Although the object of meditation is fully transcendental, yet owing to her nature, which is permeated with the quality of active mundane hankering, Maya, the non-spiritual potency of Krishna, embodying the principles of mixed sattva, rajas, and tamas, in the forms of Durga and other non-spiritual powers, meditated on the Supreme Lord Krishna as the object of their worship. So long as there is any trace of mundane desire in one's heart, it is the object of worship of Maya Devi, Durga, who has to be worshipped by such a person. Nevertheless, the fulfillment of one's heart's desire results from the worship of the object of worship of Maya Devi, and not from the worship of Maya Devi herself. This is in accordance with the shloka, Akama sarva kamo va moksha kama udaradi, tivrena bhakti yogena yajeta purusham param. The meaning of this shloka in the Bhagavatam is that though other gods, as distinct manifestations of the Supreme Lord, are bestowers of sundry specific boons, yet a sensible person should worship the all-powerful Supreme Lord, giver of all good, with unalloyed devotion, without worshipping those mundane gift-giving deities. Accordingly, Brahma meditated upon Krishna in Goloka, the object of the worship, from a distance of Mayadevi. True devotion is unalloyed devotional activity free from all mundane desire. The devotion of Brahma, etc., is not unmixed devotion, but there is a stage of unmixed predilection, even in devotion for the attainment of one's selfish desire. This has been fully described in the concluding 5 shlokas of this work. That is the easiest method of divine service prior to the attainment of self-realization by fallen souls. Text 27. Then Gayatri, mother of the Vedas, being made manifest, that is, imparted by the divine sound of the flute of Sri Krishna, entered into the lotus mouth of Brahma, born from himself through his 8 ear holes. The lotus-born Brahma, having received the Gayatri, sprung from the flute song of Sri Krishna, attained the status of the twice-born, having been initiated by the Supreme Primal Preceptor, Godhead himself. Purport. The sound of Krishna's flute is the transcendental blissful sound, hence the archetype of all Veda is present in it. The Gayatri is Vedic rhythm. It contains a brief meditation and prayer. Kama Gayatri is the highest of all the Gayatris because the meditation and prayer contained in it are full of the perfect transcendental sportive activities which are not to be found in any other Gayatri. The Gayatri that is attained as the sequel of the 18-lettered mantra is Kama Gayatri, which runs thus: Klim Kama Devaya Vidmehe Pushpavanaya Dhimahi Tanno Nanga Prachodayat. In this Gayatri, the realization of the transcendental pastimes of Sri Gopijana Ballabha, after perfect meditation and the prayer for the attainment of the transcendental God of love, are indicated. In the spiritual world, there is no better mode of endeavor for securing the super-excellent rasa-bedewed love. As soon as that Gayatri entered into the ear holes of Brahma, he became the twice-born and began to chant the Gayatri. Whoever has received the same Gayatri in reality has attained his spiritual rebirth, the status of a twice-born that is obtained in accordance with one's worldly nature and lineage by the fettered souls in this material world, is far inferior to that of the twice-born who obtains admission into the transcendental world. Because the initiation or acquisition of transcendental birth as a result of spiritual initiation is the highest of glories, inasmuch as the jiva is thereby enabled to attain to the transcendental realm. Om Ajnanatimirandasya Jnananjana Shalakaya Chakshurun Militam Jena Tasmai Shri Gurave Namaha. Nama Om Vishnu Padaya Krishna Preshtaya Bhutale Srimate Bhaktivedanta Swami Niti Namine Namaste Saraswati Deve Gauravani Pracharine Nirvishesha Shunyavadi Paschatya Deshatarine Jaya Shri Krishna Caitanya Prabhu Nityananda Sri Advaita Gadadhara Shivasari Gaur Bhaktivinoda Hare Krishna, Krishna Krishna, Hare Hare, Hare Rama, Rama Rama, Hare Hare. Thank you. Tritiya Shakti Ishate. The Vishnu Purana describes 3 energies of the Lord: the internal energy, also known as the Swarup Shakti, the external energy, known as Bahiranga Shakti, and the Tatastha, or the marginal energy, also known as the living entity. Sometimes we call the Jiva. And this external energy is differentiated from the Jiva by Krishna in the Bhagavad Gita, the inferior energy which we are in contact with regularly in the material world is non-conscious. It's nirananda, without bliss, and it's temporary. It tends to disintegrate. Whereas the living entity is known as Satchidananda. And then the internal potency of the Lord is characterized by Hladini, Sandini, and Samvit, which is very similar to the Satchidananda, only to an infinite degree. The living entity is finite in the sense that he's a tiny part of the Supreme, whereas the Supreme Whole is infinite. And when in contact with the environment, the living entity is known as Tatastha. Too much. Can you turn it down, please? Hare Krishna. Ramananda Saka Prabhu, this is too much. Could you please turn it down? Okay. I can move closer, but it's still too much.
Because we have to suit both online users and here also.
My dear online users, welcome everyone. Hare Krishna, Hare Krishna. Thank you. So the Tatastha, or is the Jiva, which means that he can live in either energy, the inferior or the superior energy, and he takes on the qualities of that. So when the Jiva, the living entity, is in proximity to the material energy, he takes on an identity known as ahankar. He identifies himself as a material body, a man, a woman, a cat, a dog, and so forth. And the process of spiritual life is getting a new identity, actually, and reawakening one's eternal identity, so to speak, with the Supreme Personality of Godhead. So that is not something that one can do on one's own. As we read last night in the Sri Caitanya caritamrta, those who endeavor to realize God by their own power come to the point of realizing the impersonal aspect of the Supreme, and they can merge into that impersonal aspect of the Supreme, but no higher. However, knowledge of the Swarup Shakti and contact with the Swarup Shakti comes as grace. It descends through the Guru Parampara. It is bestowed upon one who is fortunate here in this, wandering here in the material world. Therefore, Caitanya Mahaprabhu said, Brahmanda Brahmate Kon Bhagyavan Jeev Guru Krishna Prasati Pai Bhakti Lata Bij. By the grace of Krishna, one gets a guru. By the grace of the guru, one gets Krishna. And this Gayatri mantra, which we're speaking of, the vibration, the archetype of all the Vedic sound, which is meant to reconnect one with that internal potency, is passed down through the Guru Parampara. And one receives that sound vibration and the blessings that are inherent in it. And this infuses one with the Swarup Shakti. And therein the connection begins to the Supreme Personality of Godhead and the internal energy. So it is these verses describing how Brahma is connected to the Supreme Personality of Godhead after hearing his flute song, which becomes manifested as the Gayatri Mantra, are very significant for us because we're in a similar situation. We're born into ignorance and ahankar, we're identified with the material body, but by the grace of Guru Parampara, that is the sampradaya, which means literally the complete gift. Something's being passed down to us from Krishna, from one hand to the next through Guru Parampara. And when we receive that gift, that sound vibration, then we begin our connection with the Supreme Personality of Godhead. Therefore, it was mentioned here that Brahma was initiated. He began his spiritual connection with the Supreme by hearing the flute song of Sri Krishna. So that sound vibration of the flute of Krishna, which he is extending to the jivas in the material world, is given out of mercy. And the sound of that flute is also coming in the Gayatri Mantra. And that Gayatri Mantra is explained, or as we say nowadays, unpacked in the Srimad Bhagavatam. It is the flute song of Sri Krishna, and so is the Hare Krishna Maha Mantra. And the Sri Caitanya Caritamrta, which we'll be reading from today, is no different from the Srimad Bhagavatam, because it is a further explanation of the Srimad Bhagavatam, telling about the descent of Sri Caitanya Mahaprabhu, who is Krishna himself. He is Swayam Bhagavan, who comes to the world for his own purposes, which are to experience the experience that his devotees are having, which is a better experience than he himself has. Because his devotees are relishing his beauty and his sweetness, but he can't relish his own beauty and sweetness, although he knows it's there, because he sees it in his devotees, how they're enjoying. As the author of Caitanya Caritamrta, Krishnas Kaviraj Goswami says, they enjoy 10 million times more than he does, which is not acceptable to the supreme enjoyer, Krishna. Therefore, he comes to also enjoy himself. So Krishna comes, and Krishna can come in any way he likes. He's not restricted. Someone may say, well, God can't come to the material world. He doesn't do that. He can't do this. That kind of language is not applicable to the Supreme Personality of God. It can do anything at any time. And he does. And the way to understand and know what he does is through the Shastra. The scripture reveals the activities, the nature of the Supreme Personality of Godhead. So there are various scriptures. There are the 4 Vedas, and in the Vedas themselves, it is explained how there are explanations of the Vedas given in the form of the Itihasas and Puranas, which are written in a language that can be understood by people, especially in this present age of Kali Yuga. The Vedic language is very difficult to understand and decipher, what to speak of learn in the first place. But the Itihasas and Puranas, which explain the Vedas, and are non-different from the Vedas, and according to the proofs of Jiva Goswami are more important than the Vedas in the age of Kali, explain the philosophy of the Vedas and also the Upanishads, which are part of the Vedas. And they give us very clear instruction about the Supreme Personality of Godhead. So the Srimad Bhagavatam is called the mature fruit from the tree of Vedic knowledge. Nigama kalpataror galitam palam. And now, after Krishna appears in the Srimad Bhagavatam, he is coming again in the Kali Yuga in the most extraordinary form of Sri Caitanya Mahaprabhu, because as Krishna, as we hear in the Srimad Bhagavatam, he was the object of love, and now he comes to experience that love for himself. So he appears as a combination of Radha and Krishna in Kali Yuga. And so this most extraordinary literature, Sri Caitanya Mahaprabhu, is giving a complete explanation of actually that's coming from the top, that light. So unless you can climb all the way up there, then we're getting the very inside view from an insider's perspective, that is inside, one who's become intimate with God through devotional service. Explanations and descriptions of the nature, the characteristics of the Supreme Personality of Godhead in this world. So one who simply accepts that is very fortunate, because one can make so many arguments. God can do this, he can't do that, how do you know this is God, and so forth. There are proofs and explanations, and through logic one can understand these things, and that's important, that should be discussed. On the other hand, if one starts in a simple way and simply says, oh, I accept, this is coming from spiritual authority, therefore I accept Krishna as the Supreme Personality of Godhead, and Sri Caitanya Mahaprabhu is his most recent incarnation, then one can, without very much trouble at all, advance in devotional service simply by accepting. Many of the devotees who joined the Krishna consciousness movement in the West in the very early days simply accepted because they had no other point of reference about Krishna or incarnations of God and so forth. Many were coming from Christian backgrounds, which doesn't have a lot of information about God or his appearance in the world. Simply talks about how his son or representative came here. Some people were from the Jewish faith, and there's not a lot of information there either. So upon hearing that there are authoritative scriptures and that here's the description of God, many people just said, okay, I accept. And from there, very quickly, they could advance in devotional service. So with that kind of mindset, we can hear the Sri Caitanya Caritamrta, just accept that this is an authoritative scripture. It's been passed down out of mercy to give us connection to the spiritual world. We'll go on hearing from the Sri Caitanya Caritamrta because we're on a kind of a marathon to get all the way to Lord Chaitanya in 5 features. And right now we're on chapter 5 of the Adi Leela, and we're on text number 35. Is that correct? Actually, 36. Yad arinam priyanam cha prapyam ekam ivodatam tad brahma krishna yor aikyat kiranarko pamajusho. Where it has been stated that the Lord's enemies and devotees attain the same destination, this refers to the ultimate oneness of Brahman and Lord Krishna. This may be understood by the analogy of the sun and the sunshine, in which Brahman is like the sunshine and Krishna himself is like the sun. Purport: this verse is from the Bhakti Rasamrita Sindhu 1-278 of Srila Rupa Goswami, who further discusses the same topic in his Laghu Bhagavatamrita, Purva 5.41. There he refers to the Vishnu Purana, where Maitreya Muni asked Parashara in regard to Jaya and Vijay how it was that Hiranyakashipu next became Ravana and enjoyed more material happiness than the demigods, but did not attain salvation. Although when he became Shishupal, quarreled with Krishna and was killed he attained salvation and merged into the body of Lord Krishna. Parashara replied that Hiranyakashipu failed to recognize Lord Nrsingadev as Lord Vishnu. He thought that Nrsingadev was some living entity who had acquired such opulence by various pious activities. Being overcome by the mode of passion, he considered Lord Nrsingadev an ordinary living entity, not understanding his form. Nevertheless, because Hiranyakashipu was killed by the hands of Lord Nrsingadev in his next life, he became Ravana and had proprietorship of unlimited opulence. As Ravana, with unlimited material enjoyment, he could not accept Lord Ram as the personality of Godhead. Therefore, even though he was killed by Ram, he did not attain Sayuja, or oneness with the body of the Lord. In his Ravana body, he was too much attracted to Ram's wife, Janaki. And because of that attraction, he was able to see Lord Ram. But instead of accepting Lord Ram as an incarnation of Vishnu, Ravana thought him an ordinary living being. When killed by the hands of Ram, therefore, he got the privilege of taking birth as Shishupal, who had such immense opulence that he could think himself a competitor to Krishna. Although Shishupal was always envious of Krishna, he frequently uttered the name of Krishna and always thought of the beautiful features of Krishna. Thus, by constantly thinking and chanting of Krishna, even unfavorably, he was cleansed of the contamination of his sinful activities. When Shishupal was killed by the Sudarshan Chakra of Krishna as an enemy, his constant remembrance of Krishna dissolved the reactions of his vices, and he attained salvation by becoming one with the body of the Lord. From this incident, one can understand that even a person who thinks of Krishna as an enemy and is killed by him may be liberated by becoming one with the body of Krishna. What then must be the destination of devotees who always think favorably of Krishna as their master or friend? These devotees must attain a situation better than Brahmaloka, the impersonal bodily effulgence of Krishna. Devotees cannot be situated in the impersonal Brahman effulgence into which impersonalists desire to merge. The devotees are placed in Vaikuntha, or Krishna Loka. This discussion between Maitreya Muni and Parashara Muni centered on whether devotees come down into the material world in every millennium, like Jai and Vijay, who were cursed by the Kumaras, to that effect. In the course of these instructions to Maitreya about Hiranyakashipu, Ravana, and Shishupal, Parashara did not say that these demons were formerly Jai and Vijay. He simply described the transmigration through 3 lives. It is not necessary for the Vaikuntha associates of the Supreme Personality of Godhead to come to take the roles of his enemies in all the millenniums in which he appears. The fall down of Jai and Vijay occurred in a particular millennium. Jai and Vijay do not come down in every millennium to act as demons. To think that some associates of the Lord fall down from Vaikuntha in every millennium to become demons is totally incorrect. The Supreme Personality of Godhead has all the tendencies that may be found in the living entity, for he is the chief living entity. Therefore, it is natural that sometimes Lord Vishnu wants to fight, just as he has the tendencies to create, to enjoy, to be a friend, to accept a mother and father, and so on. He also has the tendency to fight. Sometimes important landlords and kings keep wrestlers with whom they practice mock fighting, and Vishnu makes similar arrangements. The demons who fight with the Supreme Personality of Godhead in the material world are sometimes his associates. When there is a scarcity of demons and the Lord wants to fight, he instigates some of his associates of Vaikuntha to come and play as demons. When it is said that Shishupal merged into the body of Krishna, it should be noted that in this case he was not Jai or Vijay, he was actually a demon. You listening, Ramananda? Really? How could you miss that? You just asked this question the other day. I'm going to read it again for your sake. When there is a scarcity of demons and the Lord wants to fight, he instigates some of his associates of Vaikuntha to come and play as demons. When it is said that Shishupal merged into the body of Krishna, it should be noted that in this case he was not Jai or Vijay, he was actually a demon. Yeah, that's what this whole purport's been about. In his Brihat Bhagavatamrita, Srila Sanatana Goswami has explained that the attainment of salvation by merging into the Brahman effulgence of the Lord cannot be accepted as the highest success in life, because demons like Kamsa, who are famous for killing brahmanas and cows, attained that salvation. For devotees, such salvation is abominable. Devotees are actually in a transcendental position, whereas non-devotees are candidates for hellish conditions of life. There is always a difference between the life of a devotee and the life of a demon, and their realizations are as different as heaven and hell. Demons are always accustomed to being malicious toward devotees and the killing of Brahmins and cows. For demons, merging into the Brahman effulgence may be very glorious, but for devotees it is hellish. A devotee's aim in life is to attain perfection in loving the Supreme Personality of Godhead. Those who aspire to merge into the Brahman effulgence are as abominable as demons. Devotees who aspire to associate with the Supreme Lord to render him transcendental loving service are far superior. How's everyone so far? You're able to hear? Okay. That's good. It's an important skill to develop, to be able to hear. Taiche parabhyome nana chichakti vilas nirvishesha jyotir bimba bahira prakash. Thus, in the spiritual sky, there are varieties of pastimes within the spiritual energy. Outside the Vaikuntha planets appears the impersonal reflection of light. That impersonal Brahman effulgence consists only of the effulgent rays of the Lord. Those fit for Sayuja liberation merge into that effulgence. Beyond the region of ignorance, the material cosmic manifestation, lies the realm of Siddhalok. The Siddhas reside there, absorbed in the bliss of Brahman. Demons killed by the Lord also attain that realm. Purport: Tamas means darkness. The material world is dark, and beyond the material world is light. In other words, after passing through the entire material atmosphere, one can come to the luminous spiritual sky, whose impersonal effulgence is known as Siddhaloka. Mayavadi philosophers who aspire to merge with the body of the Supreme Personality of Godhead, as well as demoniac persons who are killed by Krishna, such as Kamsa and Shishupal, enter that Brahman effulgence. Yogis who attain oneness through meditation according to the Patanjali yoga system also reach Siddhaloka. This is a verse from the Brahmanda Purana. You might note that what is taught as Ashtanga yoga studios for $15 for a walk-in visit is very much different from the very intensive practice of Ashtanga that is being referred to here, which requires complete isolation from society and full dedication 24 hours a day to the process of yoga. It's not possible in this age. Arjuna himself rejected it, and therefore it's recommended in the age of Kali Yuga, Harinama, Harinama, Harinama eva kevalam, kalaunas devanas devanas deva gatiranyata, that there's only one way, only one way, only one way in the age of Kali, and that is chanting the holy names, chanting the holy names, chanting the holy names of the Lord. She parabhyomi nara nera chari pashe dwaraka chatura vyuhera dvitira prakashe. In that spiritual sky, on the four sides of Narayan are the second expansions of the quadruple expansions of Dwarka. Purport: within the spiritual sky is a second manifestation of the quadruple forms of Dwarka from the abode of Krishna. Among these forms, which are all spiritual and immune to the material modes, Sri Baladev is represented as Mahasankarshan. The activities in the spiritual sky are manifested by the internal potency in pure spiritual existence. They expand in 6 transcendental opulences, which are all manifestations of Mahasankarshana, who is the ultimate reservoir and objective of all living entities. Although belonging to the marginal potency known as Jiva Shakti, the spiritual sparks known as the living entities are subjected to the conditions of material energy. It is because these sparks are related with both the internal and external potencies of the Lord that they are known as belonging to the marginal potency. In considering the quadruple forms of this absolute personality of Godhead known as Vasudeva, Sankarshan, Pradyumna, and Aniruddha, the impersonalists headed by Sripad Shankaracharya have interpreted the aphorisms of the Vedanta Sutra in a way suitable for the impersonal school. To provide the intrinsic import of such aphorisms, however, Srila Rupa Goswami, the leader of the 6 Goswamis of Vrindavan, has properly replied to the impersonalists in his Laghu Bhagavatamrita, which is a natural commentary on the aphorisms of the Vedanta Sutra. The Padma Purana, as quoted by Srila Rupa Goswami in his Laghu Bhagavatamrita, describes that in the spiritual sky there are 4 directions corresponding to east, west, north, and south, in which Vasudeva, Sankarshan, Aniruddha, and Pradyumna are situated. The same forms are also situated in the material sky. The Padma Purana also describes a place in the spiritual sky known as Vedavati Pur, where Vasudeva resides. In Vishnu Loka, which is above Satyaloka, Sankarshan resides. Mahasankarshan is another name of Sankarshana. Pradyumna lives in Dwarkapura, and Aniruddha lies on the eternal bed of Shesha, generally known as Anantashaya, on the island called Shvetadweep in the ocean of milk. And now, we're about to read the longest purport in Srila Prabhupada's books. Are you ready? Yes. Avantika, are you ready? How old are you?
10.
She's 10 and she's ready for the longest purport in Prabhupada's book. That's pretty good. Thank you for that. Vasudeva, Sankarshan, Pradyumna, and Aniruddha constitute this second quadruple. They are purely transcendental. Purport. Sripad Shankaracharya has misleadingly explained the quadruple form Chaturvyuha in his interpretation of the 42nd aphorism of Chapter 2 of the second Kanda of the Vedanta Sutra. Could you also get a Vedanta Sutra? Do we have it here? Get that also, please. In verses 41 through 47 of this chapter of Sri Caitanya Charitamrita, Srila Krishnadas Kaviraj Goswami answers Sripad Shankaracharya's misleading objections to the personal features of the Absolute Truth. The Supreme Personality of Godhead, the Absolute Truth, is not like a material object that can be known by experimental knowledge or sense perception. In the Narada Pancharatra, this fact has been explained by Narayan himself to Lord Shiva. But Shankaracharya, the incarnation of Shiva, under the order of Narayan, his master, had to mislead the monists who favor ultimate extinction. In the conditioned stage of existence, all living entities have 4 basic defects, of which one is the cheating propensity. Shankaracharya has carried this cheating propensity to the extreme to mislead the monists. Actually, the explanation of the quadruple forms in the Vedic literature cannot be understood by the speculation of a conditioned soul. The quadruple forms should therefore be accepted just as they are described. The authority of the Vedas is such that even if one does not understand something by his limited perception, he should accept the Vedic injunction and not create interpretations to suit his imperfect understanding. In his Sharirak Bhashya, However, Shankaracharya has increased the misunderstanding of the monists. The quadruple forms have a spiritual existence that can be realized in Vasudeva Sattva, Shuddha Sattva, or unqualified goodness, which accompanies complete absorption in the understanding of Vasudeva. The quadruple forms, who are full in the six opulences of the Supreme Personality of Godhead, are the enjoyers of the internal potency. Thinking the Absolute Personality of Godhead to be poverty-stricken or to have no potency, or in other words, to be impotent, is simply rascaldom. This rascaldom is the profession of the conditioned soul. What is the profession of the conditioned soul? Rascaldom. What do you do for a living? On your, well, not you, but I could do this. On my immigration form, it says occupation. I could put rascaldom. This rascaldom is the profession of the conditioned soul, and it increases his bewilderment. One who cannot understand the distinctions between the spiritual world and the material world has no qualification to examine or know the situation of the transcendental quadruple forms. In his commentary on Vedanta Sutra 2:42-45, His Holiness Sripad Shankaracharya has made a futile attempt to nullify the existence of these quadruple forms in the spiritual world. Shankaracharya says in Sutra 42 that devotees think the Supreme Personality of Godhead Vasudeva, Sri Krishna, to be one, to be free from material qualities, and to have a transcendental body full of bliss and eternal existence. He is the ultimate goal of the devotees, who believe that the Supreme Personality of Godhead expands himself into four other eternal transcendental forms: Vasudeva, Sankarshan, Pradyumna, and Aniruddha. From Vasudeva, who is the primary expansion, comes Sankarshan, Pradyumna, and Aniruddha in that order. Another name of Vasudeva is Paramatma. Another name of Shankarshan is Jiva, the living entity. Another name of Pradyumna is mind, and another name of Aniruddha is Ahankar, false ego. Among these expansions, Vasudeva is considered the origin of the material nature. Therefore, Shankaracharya says that Sankarshan, Pradyumna, and Aniruddha must be creations of that original cause. Great souls assert that Narayan, who is known as the Paramatma or Supersoul, is beyond material nature. And this is in accordance with the statements of the Vedic literature. Mayavadis also agree that Narayan can expand himself into various forms. Shankara says that he does not attempt to argue that portion of the devotee's understanding, but he must protest the idea that Sankarshan is produced from Vasudeva. Pradyumna is produced from Sankarshan, and Aniruddha is produced from Pradyumna. For if Sankarshan is understood to represent the living entities created from the body of Vasudeva, the living entities would have to be non-eternal. The living entities are supposed to be free from material contamination by engaging in prolonged temple worship of the Supreme Personality of Godhead, reading Vedic literature and performing yoga and pious activities to attain the Supreme Lord. But if the living entities had been created from material nature at a certain point, they would be non-eternal and would have no chance to be liberated and associate with the Supreme Personality of Godhead. When a cause is nullified, its results are nullified. In the second chapter of the Vedanta Sutras, second Kanda, Acharya Vedavyas has also refuted the conception that the living beings were ever born. Natma shruter nityavach cha tabyaha. Because there is no creation for the living entities, they must be eternal. Shankaracharya says, Sutra 43, that devotees think that Pradyumna, who is considered to represent the senses, has sprung from Sankarshan, who is considered to represent the living entities. But we cannot actually experience that a person can produce senses. Devotees also say that from Pradyumna has sprung Aniruddha, who is considered to represent the ego. But Sankaracharya says that unless the devotees can show how ego and the means of knowledge can generate from a person, such an explanation of the Vedanta Sutra cannot be accepted, for no other philosophers accept the sutras in that way. Shankaracharya also says in Sutra 44 that he cannot accept the devotee's idea that Shankarshan, Pradyumna, and Aniruddha are equally as powerful as the absolute personality of Godhead, full in the six opulences of knowledge, wealth, strength, fame, beauty, and renunciation, and free from the flaw of generation at a certain point. Even if they are full expansions, the flaw of generation remains. Vasudeva, Sankarshan, Pradyumna, and Aniruddha, being distinct individual persons, cannot be one. Therefore, if they are accepted as absolute, full, and equal, there would have to be many personalities of Godhead. But there is no need to accept that there are many personalities of Godhead, because acceptance of one omnipotent God is sufficient for all purposes. The acceptance of more than one God is contradictory to the conclusion that Lord Vasudeva, the absolute personality of Godhead, is one without a second. Even if we agree to accept that the quadruple forms of Godhead are all identical, we cannot avoid the incongruous flaw of non-eternity. Unless we accept that there are some differences among the personalities, there is no meaning to the idea that Sankarshan is an expansion of Vasudeva, Pradyumna is an expansion of Sankarshan, and Aniruddha is an expansion of Pradyumna. There must be a distinction between cause and effect. For example, a pot is distinct from the earth from which it is made, and therefore we can ascertain that the earth is the cause and the pot is the effect. Without such distinction, there is no meaning to cause and effect. Furthermore, the followers of the Pancharatric principles do not accept any difference in knowledge and qualities between Vasudeva, Sankarshan, Pradyumna, and Aniruddha. The devotees accept all these expansions to be one, but why should they restrict oneness to these quadruple expansions? Certainly, we should not do so. For all living entities, from Brahma to the insignificant ant, are expansions of Vasudeva as accepted in all the Shrutis and Smritis. Shankaracharya also says, Sutra 45, that the devotees who follow the Pancharatra state that God's qualities and God Himself, as the owner of the qualities, are the same. But how can the Bhagavat school state that the six opulences, wisdom, wealth, strength, fame, beauty, and renunciation, are identical with Lord Vasudeva? This is impossible. In his Laghu Bhagavatamrita, Srila Rupa Goswami has refuted the charges directed against the devotees by Sripad Shankaracharya regarding their explanation of the quadruple forms Vasudeva, Sankarshan, Pradyumna, and Aniruddha. Rupa Goswami says that these four expansions of Narayan are present in the spiritual sky, where they are famous as Mahavasta. Among them, Vasudeva is worshipped within the heart by meditation, because he is the predominating deity of the heart, as explained in the Srimad Bhagavatam 4.3.23. Can we have that, please? Sankarshan, the second expansion, is Vasudeva's personal expansion for pastimes. And since he is the reservoir of all living entities, he is sometimes called Jiva. The beauty of Sankarshan is greater than that of innumerable full moons radiating light beams. He is worshipable as the principle of ego. He has invested Anantadev with all the potencies of sustenance. For the dissolution of the creation, he also exhibits himself as the supersoul in Rudra, in Adharma, the personality of irreligion, in Sarpa, snakes, in Antaka, Yamaraj, the Lord of Death, and in the demons. Everyone okay so far? Yeah, repeating, they are famous as Mahavasta. Among them, Vasudeva is worshipped within the heart by meditation, because he is the predominating deity of the heart, as explained in the Srimad Bhagavatam 4.3.23, which is Sattvam Vishuddham Vasudeva Shabditam Yad Iyate Tatra Puman Apavrata Sattvet Tasmin Bhagavan Vasudeva Yadhoksajo Me Namasa Vadiyate. Lord Shiva says, I am always engaged in offering obeisances to Lord Vasudeva in pure Krishna consciousness. Krishna consciousness is always pure consciousness in which the Supreme Personality of Godhead, known as Vasudeva, is revealed without any covering. Purport: the living entity is constitutionally pure, asango hyayam purushaha. In the Vedic literature it is said that the soul is always pure and uncontaminated by material attachment. The identification of the body with the soul is due to misunderstanding. As soon as one is fully Krishna conscious, it is to be understood that one is in his pure original constitutional position. This state of existence is called Shuddha Sattva, called what? Which means that it is transcendental to the material qualities. Since this Shuddha Sattva existence is under the direct action of the internal potency, in this state the activities of material consciousness stop. For example, when iron is put into a fire, it becomes warm, and when red hot, although it is iron, it acts like fire. Similarly, when copper is surcharged with electricity, its action as copper stops. It acts as electricity. Bhagavad Gita 14:26 also confirms that anyone who engages in unadulterated devotional service to the Lord is at once elevated to the position of pure Brahman. Mam chayo vyabhicharena bhakti yogena sevate sagunan samatityaitan brahmabhuyaya kalpate. Therefore, Shuddha Sattva, as described in this verse, is the transcendental position, which is technically called Vasudeva. Vasudeva is also the name of the person from whom Krishna appears. This verse explains that the pure state is called Vasudeva because in that state, Vasudeva, the Supreme Personality of Godhead, is revealed without any covering. To execute unadulterated devotional service, therefore, one must follow the rules and regulations of devotional service without desire to gain material profit by fruit of activities or mental speculation. In pure devotional service, one simply serves the Supreme Personality of Godhead as a matter of duty, without reason and without being impeded by material conditions. That is called Shuddha Sattva or Vasudeva, because in that stage the Supreme Person Krishna is revealed in the heart of the devotee. Srila Jiva Goswami has very nicely described this Vasudeva or Shuddha Sattva in his Bhagavat Sandarbha. He explains that Ashtotara Shata 108 is added to the name of the spiritual master to indicate one who is situated in Shuddha Sattva, or in the transcendental state of Vasudeva. The word Vasudeva is also used for other purposes. For example, Vasudeva also means one who is everywhere, or all-pervading. The sun is also called Vasudeva Shabditam. The word Vasudeva may be utilized for different purposes, but whatever purpose we adopt, Vasudeva means the all-pervading or localized Supreme Personality of Godhead. In Bhagavad Gita 7:19, it is also stated Vasudeva Sarvamiti. Factual realization is to understand Vasudeva, the Supreme Personality of Godhead, and surrender unto Him. Vasudeva is the ground wherein Vasudeva, the Supreme Personality of Godhead, is revealed. When one is free from the contamination of material nature and is situated in pure Krishna consciousness, or in the Vasudeva state, Vasudeva, the Supreme Person, is revealed. This state is also called Kaivalya, which means pure consciousness. Jnanam Sattvikam Kaivalyam. When one is situated in pure transcendental consciousness, one is situated in Kaivalya. Therefore, Vasudeva also means Kaivalya, a word which is generally used by impersonalists. Impersonal Kaivalya is not the last stage of realization, but in Krishna consciousness, Kaivalya, when one understands the Supreme Personality of Godhead, then one is successful. In that pure state, by hearing, chanting, remembering, etc., because of the development of knowledge of the science of Krishna, one can understand the Supreme Personality of Godhead. All these activities are under the guidance of the internal energy of the Supreme Lord. The action of the internal potency is also described in this verse as apavrata, free from any covering. Because the Supreme Personality of Godhead, His name, His form, His quality, His paraphernalia, etc., being transcendental, are beyond material nature, it is not possible to understand any one of them with the materialistic senses. When the senses are purified by the discharge of pure devotional service, Rishikena Rishikesha Sevanam Bhakti Ruchite, the pure senses can see Krishna without covering. Now one may inquire that since factually the devotee has the same material existential body, how is it possible that the same materialistic eyes become purified by devotional service? The example as stated by Lord Caitanya is that devotional service cleanses the mirror of the mind. In a clean mirror, one can see one's face very distinctly. Similarly, simply by cleansing the mirror of the mind, one can have a clear conception of the Supreme Personality of Godhead. It is stated in Bhagavad Gita 8.8, Abhyasa Yoga Yuktena, by executing one's prescribed duties in devotional service, Chaitasa Nanyagamina, or simply by hearing about God and chanting about Him, that's what we're doing now. If one's mind is always engaged in chanting and hearing and is not allowed to go elsewhere, one can realize the Supreme Personality of Godhead. There you have it. As confirmed by Lord Caitanya by the Bhakti Yoga process, beginning from hearing and chanting, one can cleanse the heart and mind, and thus one can clearly see the face of the Supreme Personality of Godhead. Lord Shiva said that since his heart was always filled with the conception of Vasudeva, the Supreme Personality of Godhead, because of the Supreme Lord's presence within his mind and heart, he was always offering obeisances unto that Supreme Godhead. In other words, Lord Shiva is always in trance, samadhi. This samadhi is not under the control of the devotee. It is under the control of Vasudeva. For the entire internal energy of the Supreme Personality of Godhead acts under his order. Of course, the material energy also acts by his order, but his direct will is specifically executed through the spiritual energy. Thus, by his spiritual energy, he reveals himself. It is stated in Bhagavad Gita 4.6, Sambhavam Yatmamaya. Did you catch that last part? This samadhi is not under the control of the devotee, it is under the control of Vasudeva. For the entire internal energy of the Supreme Personality of Godhead is under his order. Of course, the material energy also acts by his order, but his direct will is specifically executed through the spiritual energy. Thus, by his spiritual energy, he reveals himself. It is also stated in Bhagavad Gita 4.6, Sambhavam Yatmamaya Ya. Atmamaya means internal potency. By his sweet will, he reveals himself to his internal potency, by his internal potency, being satisfied by the transcendental loving service of the devotee. The devotee never commands, my dear Lord, please come here. Can you get me Bhagavad Gita 4.6, please? My dear Lord, please come here so that I can see you. It is not the position of the devotee to command the Supreme Personality of Godhead to come before him or to dance before him. There are so many so-called devotees who command the Lord to come before them dancing. The Lord, however, is not subject to anyone's command, but if he is satisfied by one's pure devotional activities, he reveals himself. Therefore, a meaningful word in this verse is adhoksaja, for it indicates that the activities of our material senses will fail to realize the Supreme Personality of Godhead. So, from akar to ja, and all the syllables in between, they're not capable of actually explaining the Supreme Personality of Godhead. Adhoksaja. He's beyond that. Personality. One cannot realize the Supreme Personality of Godhead simply by the attempt of one's speculative mind, but if one desires, he can subdue all the material activities of his senses, and the Lord, by manifesting his spiritual energy, can reveal himself to the pure devotee. When the Supreme Personality of Godhead reveals himself to the pure devotee, the devotee has no other duty than to offer him respectful obeisances. The Absolute Truth reveals himself to the devotee in his form. He is not formless. Vasudeva is not formless, for it is stated in this verse that as soon as the Lord reveals himself, the devotee offers his obeisances. Obeisances are offered to a person, not to anything impersonal. One should not accept the Mayavad interpretation that Vasudeva is impersonal. And that's what we're hearing about in the other purport. As stated in Bhagavad Gita, prapadyate, one surrenders. One surrenders to a person, not to impersonal non-duality. Whenever there is a question of surrendering or offering obeisances, there must be an object of surrender or obeisances. And in Bhagavad Gita 4.6, Krishna says, Ajopi san avyayatma bhutanam ishwaropi san prakritim swam adhishtaya sambhavam yatma maya. Although I am unborn and my transcendental body never deteriorates, and although I am the Lord of all living entities, I still appear in every millennium in my original transcendental form. Are you getting the idea that the Lord is the Supreme Personality of Godhead? And that He's the master of all the energies? He can reveal Himself to one who surrenders. Any other points that you're getting? Yes?
So in the early parts of the purport, right?
In the early parts of the purport, we talk about
conditioned soul, and then we talk about the Supreme Personality of Godhead, right? The question I have is it possible for the conditioned soul to realize God?
yes, when he becomes unconditioned. That's the point of this verse, apavrita. When he comes to the state of consciousness known as Vasudeva, then he's apavrita. Sattvam vishuddham vasudeva shabditam yad iyate tatram idam upavrita. Apavrita means uncovered. So one's consciousness has to be uncovered. And then in that state, the Lord freely reveals Himself to the living entity. So that can be achieved by engaging the senses in the service of the Lord. Sarvapadi vanirmuktam tat pratvena nirmalam hrishikena hrishikesha sevanam bhaktiruchate. So that when one engages one's senses in the service of the Lord, they become free from designations. That's one of the byproducts of performing devotional service. They become uncontaminated.
Thank you.
You're welcome.
Oh, yeah, one more comment.
Yes.
So in the last paragraphs, right, we talk about different forms like Vasudeva, Aniruddha, Pradyumna, all right. So, I mean, long time ago when my parents did my thread ceremony, right, so the person who performed the ceremony just rushed through and, had just go through the ones, he just went through once to explain what it was, but he never really, took pains. But now when I read and I relate, right, I really feel good.
Maybe you can still get your money back.
So we just come to know, what each form is, what is the purpose. So it feels.
You want to know
really
that?
good.
Oh, that you're enjoying hearing about all these things.
Thank you very much.
Yeah. Thanks, Prabhupada. He's revealing all these things. Okay, so it's Prashant. I've had a Prashant sighting. Okay, let's see. We're back to the Sri Caitanya Charitamrta. And we've also got Srivas Pandit Prabhu is in the house. That's always beneficial. So here's what we'll do. Let's have everyone fill up the seats. You can move forward. All the book stands are the same. So just switch seats and move up. Fill in the gaps. We don't like gaps in the middle. Because there's one more little gap here. Well, that's one way to fix it. There you go. Just move the seat. That's better. Then we have closer proximity. Sankarshan, the second expansion, is Vasudev's personal expansion for pastimes. And since he is the reservoir of all living entities, he is sometimes called Jiva. The beauty of Sankarshan is greater than that of innumerable full moons radiating light beams. He is worshipable as the principle of ego. He has invested Anantadev with all the potencies of sustenance. For the dissolution of the creation, he also exhibits himself as the supersoul in Rudra. in Adharma, the personality of irreligion, in Sarpa, snakes, in Antaka, Yamaraj, Lord of Death, and in the demons. Pradyumna, the third manifestation, appears from Sankarsana. Those who are especially intelligent worship this Pradyumna expansion of Sankarsana as the principle of the intelligence. The goddess of fortune always chants the glories of Pradyumna in the place known as Ilavrtavarsha, and she always serves him with great devotion. His complexion appears somewhat golden and sometimes bluish, like new monsoon clouds in the sky. He is the origin of the creation of the material world, and he has invested his creative principle in Cupid. It is by his direction only that all men and demigods and other living entities function with energy for regeneration. Aniruddha, the fourth of the quadruple expansions, is worshipped by great sages and psychologists as the principle of the mind. His complexion is similar to the bluish hue of a blue cloud. He engages in the maintenance of the cosmic manifestation and is the supersoul of Dharma, the deity of religiosity, the Manus, the progenitors of mankind, and the Devatas, demigods. The Moksha Dharma, Vedic scripture, indicates that Pradyumna is the deity of the total mind, whereas Aniruddha is the deity of the total ego. But previous statements regarding the quadruple forms are confirmed in the Pancharatra Tantras in all respects. In the Laghu Bhagavatamrita, there is a lucid explanation of the inconceivable potencies of the Supreme Personality of Godhead. Negating Sankaracharya's statements, the Mahavaraha Purana states, Sarve nitya shashvatascha dehas tasya parat manaha hanopadhana rahita naiva prakriti ja kvachit. All the varied expansions of the personality of Godhead are transcendental and eternal, and all of them repeatedly descend to all the different universes of the material creation. Their bodies, composed of eternity, bliss, and knowledge, are everlasting. There is no chance of their decaying, for they are not creations of the material world. Their forms are concentrated spiritual existence, always complete with all spiritual qualities and devoid of material contamination. Confirming these statements, the Narada Pancharatra asserts, Manir yata vibhagena nila pita dibir yuta rupa bedam avapnoti dhyana bedat tatachutaha. The infallible personality of Godhead can manifest his body in different ways according to different modes of worship, just as the Vaidurya gem can manifest itself in various colors, such as blue and yellow. Each incarnation is distinct from all the others. This is possible by the Lord's inconceivable potency, by which he can simultaneously represent himself as one, as various partial forms, and as the origin of these partial forms. Nothing is impossible for his inconceivable potencies. That makes it easier, doesn't it? Krishna is one without a second, but he manifests himself in different bodies, as stated by Narada in the 10th canto of the Srimad Bhagavatam, Chitram Baitatare Kena Vapusha Yogapat Pratak Griheshu Dravyashta Sahasram Striya Eka Udavahat. It is wonderful indeed that one Krishna has simultaneously become different Krishnas in 16,000 palaces to accept 16,000 queens as his wives. Bhagavatam 1069-2. The Padma Purana also explains, Sadeva Bahuda Bhutva Nirguna Purushottamaha Eki Bhuya Punasheti Shete Nirdosha Harir Adi Krit. The same personality of Godhead, Purushottam, the original person, who is always devoid of material qualities and contamination, can exhibit himself in various forms at the same time, and at the same time lie down in one form. That helps, doesn't it? In the 10th canto, so Narada Muni went to Dwarka, as he does frequently. And there he saw the 16,108 palaces of Lord Krishna. And he went and visited the palaces. And each one of them, Krishna was performing a different activity. He was there in his full form, but he was in some places playing with his children. In some places he was planning out some strategy with Uddhava. And others he was being catered to by his queen and maidservants in the palace. And Narada was astonished to see this. Now, yogis can expand themselves into various forms, but they're like mirror images. And Narada knows how to do that too, because he has all the siddhis. But Krishna is different. He expands himself unlimitedly and performs various pastimes, for instance, to the 16,108 palaces, which is nothing. It's just a number. As Prabhupada points out, it could be 16 million, 16 billion, 16 trillion. It makes no difference. He could expand them. But 16,108, that should do it, because nobody else can do that. And when he leaves the palaces for the day, all the Krishnas walk out the door and then they merge into one Krishna. Although similarly, when Krishna appears in this world, all the avatars appear within the body of Krishna. And he also manifests himself simultaneously in every atom of the universe. Ekop yasora charitum jagaranda kotim yachaktirasti jagaranda chaya yaranta andantarasta paramanu chayantarastam govindamadi purushamtam aham bhajami. He's manifest in every particle of the universe at one and the same time in his fullness. Not that it's some reflection or something like that, but he's fully present there. And he's within the heart of every living entity. Ishvara sarvabhutanam hridaya sharajuna chistati brahmayan sarvabhutani yantra rudrani maya. There to relate with every living entity is Krishna as the supersoul who's observing the activities of the living entity. On the tree of the body, the living entity is the eating bird who's trying to get something from Costco or Home Depot and thinking, you know, oh, this comes in a big package, so I'm really going to enjoy all this toilet paper or whatever it is that comes in a large package. And Krishna is simply observing. He's not connected or interested with the material energy in any way. The little jiva is. And so this is Krishna's power of manifestation everywhere. As a person, personally manifested. In the 10th canto of Srimad Bhagavatam, it is said, Yajanti twan mayas tvam vai bahu murtyeka murtikam. O my Lord, although you manifest yourself in varieties of forms, you are one without a second. Therefore, the pure devotees concentrate upon you and worship only you. That's 1040.7. In the Kurma Purana, it is said, Ashtulash chanam nushchaiva stulo nushchaiva sarvataha avarna sarvata prokta shyamo ratnanta lochanaha. The Lord is personal, although impersonal. He is atomic, although great. He is blackish and has red eyes, although he is colorless. By material calculation, all this may appear contradictory, but if we understand that the Supreme Personality of Godhead has inconceivable potencies, we can accept these facts as eternally possible in Him. In our present condition, we cannot understand the spiritual activities and how they occur, but although they are inconceivable in the material context, we should not disregard such contradictory conceptions. Although it is apparently inconceivable, it is quite possible for the Absolute to reconcile all opposing elements. Srimad Bhagavatam establishes this in the 6th canto, 6.9, 34 through 37, which is quoted as follows. My dear Lord, your transcendental pastimes and enjoyments all appear inconceivable because they are not limited by the causal and effective actions of material thought. You can do everything without performing bodily work. The Vedas say that the Absolute Truth has multifarious potencies and does not need to do anything personally. My dear Lord, you are entirely devoid of material qualities. Without anyone's help, you can create, maintain, and dissolve the entire qualitative material manifestation. Yet in all such activities, you do not change. You do not accept the results of your activities, unlike ordinary demons and demigods who suffer or enjoy the reactions of their activities in the material world. Unaffected by the reactions of work, you eternally exist with your full spiritual potency. This we cannot fully understand. Because you are unlimited in your six opulences, no one can count your transcendental qualities. Philosophers and other thoughtful persons are overwhelmed by the contradictory manifestations of the physical world and the propositions of logical arguments and judgments. Because they are bewildered by word jugglery and disturbed by the different calculations of the scriptures, their theories cannot touch you, who are the ruler and controller of everyone, and whose glories are beyond conception. Your inconceivable potency keeps you unattached to the mundane qualities, surpassing all conceptions of material contemplation. Your pure transcendental knowledge keeps you beyond all speculative processes. By your inconceivable potency, there is nothing contradictory in you. People may sometimes think of you as impersonal or personal, but you are one. For persons who are confused or bewildered, a rope may appear to manifest itself as different kinds of snakes. For similarly confused persons who are uncertain about you, you create various philosophical methods in pursuance of their uncertain positions. Did you hear that last statement? For similar confused persons who are uncertain about you, you create various philosophical methods in pursuance of their uncertain positions. He's fulfilling the desires of every living entity. Therefore, he provides alternative philosophies for those who want to be misled. We should always remember the differences between spiritual and material actions. That was the end quote. So does anybody know where that was from? Do you recognize who was speaking? You want to look it up? Good. We should always remember the differences between spiritual and material actions. The Supreme Lord, being all spiritual, can perform any act without extraneous help. In the material world, if we want to manufacture an earthen pot, we need the ingredients, a machine, and also a laborer. But we should not extend this idea to the actions of the Supreme Lord, for he can create anything in a moment without that which appears necessary in our own conception. When the Lord appears as an incarnation to fulfill a particular purpose, this does not indicate that he is unable to fulfill it without appearing. He can do anything simply by his will, but by his causeless mercy he appears to be dependent upon his devotees. He appears as the son of Yashoda Mata, not because he is dependent on her care, but because he accepts such a role by his causeless mercy. When he appears for the protection of his devotees, he naturally accepts trials and tribulations on their behalf. In the Bhagavad Gita it is said that the Lord, being equally disposed towards every living entity, has no enemies and no friends, but he has special affection for a devotee who always thinks of him in love. Therefore, neutrality and partiality are both among the transcendental qualities of the Lord, and they are properly adjusted by his inconceivable energy. The Lord is Parabrahman, or the source of the impersonal Brahma, which is his all-pervading feature of neutrality. In his personal feature, however, as the owner of all transcendental opulences, the Lord displays his partiality by taking the side of his devotees. Partiality, neutrality, and all such qualities are present in God. Otherwise, they could not be experienced in the creation. Since he is the total existence, all things are properly adjusted in the Absolute. In the relative world, such qualities are displayed in a perverted manner, and therefore we experience non-duality as a perverted reflection. I'll read that again. In the relative world, such qualities are displayed in a perverted manner, and therefore we experience non-duality as a perverted reflection. Because there is no logic to explain how things happen in the realm of spirit, the Lord is sometimes described as being beyond the range of experience. But if we simply accept the Lord's inconceivability, we can then adjust all things in Him. Non-devotees cannot understand the Lord's inconceivable energy, and consequently for them it is said that He is beyond the range of conceivable expression. The author of the Brahma Sutras accepts this fact and says, Shrutes tu shabda mulatvat. The Supreme Personality of Godhead, being inconceivable to an ordinary man, can be understood only through the evidence of the Vedic injunctions. The Skanda Purana confirms, Achinta kalu ye bhava natatam tarkena yojayet. Matters inconceivable to a common man should not be subject for argument. We find very wonderful qualities even in such material things as jewels and drugs. Indeed, their qualities often appear inconceivable. Therefore, if we do not attribute inconceivable potencies to the Supreme Personality of Godhead, we cannot establish His supremacy. It is because of these inconceivable potencies that the glories of the Lord have always been accepted as difficult to understand. Feel better? Okay, where's it from? The demigods are praying. That's where it starts, right where your thumb is? Number 39. Yes, so the appearance of the demon Vritrashura, and the demigod said, O Supreme Personality of Godhead, you are competent to give the results of sacrifice. Important section. Thank you very much. Everyone okay? Better than okay? Too much okay. Ignorance and the jugglery of words are very common in human society, but they do not help one understand the inconceivable energies of the Supreme Personality of Godhead. If we accept such ignorance and word jugglery, we cannot accept the Supreme Lord's perfection in 6 opulences. For example, one of the opulences of the Supreme Lord is complete knowledge. Therefore, how could ignorance be conceivable in Him? Vedic instructions and sensible arguments establish that the Lord's maintaining the cosmic manifestation and simultaneously being indifferent to the activities of His maintenance cannot be contradictory because of His inconceivable energies. To a person who is always absorbed in the thought of snakes, a rope always appears to be a snake, and similarly to a person bewildered by material qualities and devoid of knowledge of the Absolute, the Supreme Personality of Godhead appears according to diverse bewildered conclusions. That explains it. Someone might argue that the absolute would be affected by duality if he were both all-cognizance Brahman and the Personality of Godhead with 6 opulences in full, Bhagavan. To refute such an argument, the aphorism Swarup Tvayam Ikshite declares that in spite of appearances, there is no chance of duality in the Absolute, for He is but one in diverse manifestations. Understanding that the Absolute displays varied pastimes by the influence of His energies at once removes the apparent incongruity of His inconceivably opposite energies. Srimad Bhagavatam 3.4.16 gives the following descriptions of the inconceivable potencies of the Lord. Karmanyani hasya bhavo bhavasyate durgashrayo tarhi bhayat palayanam kalatmano yet pramada yutashraya swatman rate kidyati dir vidam iha. Although the Supreme Personality of Godhead has nothing to do, He nevertheless acts. Although He is always unborn, He nevertheless takes birth. Although He is time, fearful to everyone, He flees Mathura in fear of His enemy to take shelter in a fort. And although He is self-sufficient, He marries 16,000 women. These pastimes seem like bewildering contradictions even to the most intelligent. Had these activities of the Lord not been a reality, sages would not have been puzzled by them. Therefore, such activities should never be considered imaginary. Whenever the Lord desires, His inconceivable energy, Yogamaya, serves him in creating and performing such pastimes. The scriptures known as the Pancharatra Shastras are recognized Vedic scriptures that have been accepted by great acharyas. These scriptures are not products of the modes of passion and ignorance. Learned scholars and brahmanas therefore always refer to them as Sattvata Samhitas. The original speaker of these scriptures is Narayan, the Supreme Personality of Godhead. This is especially mentioned in the Moksha Dharma, which is part of the Shanti Parva of the Mahabharata. Liberated sages like Narada and Vyasa, who are free from the 4 defects of conditioned souls, are the propagators of these scriptures. Sri Narada Muni is the original speaker of the Pancharatra Shastra. Srimad Bhagavatam is also considered a Sattvata Samhita. Indeed, Sri Caitanya Mahaprabhu declared, Srimad Bhagavatam Puranam Amalam. Srimad Bhagavatam is a spotless Purana. Malicious editors and scholars who attempt to misrepresent the Pancharatra Shastras to refute their regulations are most abominable. In the modern age, such malicious scholars have even commented misleadingly upon the Bhagavad Gita, which was spoken by Krishna, to prove that there is no Krishna. How the Mayavadis have misinterpreted the Pancharatric Vidhi will be shown below. 1. In commenting on Vedanta Sutra 2242, Sripad Shankaracharya has claimed that Sankarshan is a jiva, an ordinary living entity. But there is no evidence in any Vedic scripture that devotees of the Lord have ever said that Sankarshan is an ordinary living entity. He is an infallible plenary expansion of the Supreme Personality of Godhead in the Vishnu category, and he is beyond the creation of material nature. He is the original source of the living entities. The Upanishads declare, Nityo Nityanam Chaitanas Chaitananam. He is the supreme living entity among all the living entities. Therefore, he is Vibhu Chaitanya, the greatest. He is directly the cause of the cosmic manifestation and the infinitesimal living beings. He is the infinite living entity, and ordinary living entities are infinitesimal. Infinitesimal. Therefore, he is never to be considered an ordinary living being, for that would be against the conclusion of the authorized scriptures. The living entities are also beyond the limitations of birth and death. This is the version of the Vedas, and it is accepted by those who follow scriptural injunctions and who have actually descended in the disciplic succession. 2. So Sankarshan is not a jiva, but sometimes he's called jiva because he's the reservoir of jivas and manifests these jivas. Okay? 2. You can tell all your friends at school. 2. In answer to Shankaracharya's commentary on Vedanta Sutra 2243, it must be said that the original Vishnu of all the Vishnu categories, which are distributed in several ways, is Mula Shankarshan. Mula means the original. Sankarshan is also Vishnu, but from him all other Vishnus expand. This is confirmed in the Brahma Samhita 546, wherein it is said that just as a flame transferred from another flame acts like the original, so the Vishnus who emanate from Mula Sankarshan are as good as the original Vishnu. One should worship that Supreme Personality of Godhead, Govinda, who thus expands himself. 3. In reply to the commentary of Shankaracharya on the 44th aphorism, it may be said that no pure devotees strictly following the principles of the Pancharatra will ever accept the statement that all the expansions of Vishnu are different identities. For this idea is completely false. Even Sripad Shankaracharya, in his commentary on the 42nd aphorism, has accepted that the personality of Godhead can automatically expand himself variously. Therefore, his commentary on the 42nd aphorism and his commentary on the 44th aphorism are contradictory. It is a defect of Mayavad commentaries that they make one statement in one place and a contradictory statement in another place as a tactic to refute the Bhagavat school. Thus, Mayavadi commentators do not even follow regulative principles. It should be noted that the Bhagavat school accepts the quadruple forms of Narayan, but that does not mean that it accepts many gods. Devotees know perfectly well that the absolute truth, the Supreme Personality of Godhead, is one without a second. They are never pantheists, worshippers of many gods, for this is against the injunction of the Vedas. Devotees completely believe with strong faith that Narayan is transcendental and has inconceivable proprietorship of various transcendental potencies. We therefore recommend that scholars consult the Laghu Bhagavatamrita of Srila Rupa Goswami, where these ideas are explicitly stated. Sripad Shankaracharya has tried to prove that Vasudeva, Sankarsad, Pradyumna, and Aniruddha expand through cause and effect. He has compared them with earth and earthen pots. That is completely ignorant, however, for there is no such thing as cause and effect in their expansions. Nanyat yat sad asat param. The Kurma Purana also confirms Deha Dehi Vibhedo Yam Neshvare Vidyate Kvachit. There's no difference between body and soul in the Supreme Personality of Godhead. Cause and effect are material. For example, it is seen that a father's body is the cause of his son's body, but the soul is neither cause nor effect. On the spiritual platform, there are none of the differences we find in cause and effect. Since all the forms of the Supreme Personality of Godhead are spiritually supreme, they are equally controllers of material nature. Standing on the fourth dimension, they are predominating figures of the transcendental platform. There is no trace of material contamination in their expansions because material laws cannot influence them. There is no such rule as cause and effect outside of the material world. Therefore, the understanding of cause and effect cannot approach the full transcendental complete expansions of the Supreme Personality of Godhead. The Vedic literature proves this. Om Purnama Atah Purnam Idam Purnat Purnam Uddachyate Purnasya Purnamadhaya Purnam Eva Vashishyate. The personality of Godhead is perfect and complete. And because he is completely perfect, all emanations from him, such as this phenomenal world, are perfectly equipped as complete wholes. Whatever is produced of the complete whole is also complete in it by itself. Because he is the complete whole, even though so many complete units emanate from him, he remains the complete balance. That's from Brihad Aranyaku Upanishad 5.1. It is most apparent that non-devotees violate the rules and regulations of devotional service to equate the whole cosmic manifestation, which is the external feature of Vishnu, with the Supreme Personality of Godhead, who is the controller of Maya, or with his quadruple expansions. Equating Maya with Spirit or Maya with the Lord is a sign of atheism. The cosmic creation which manifests life in forms from Brahma to the ant is the external feature of the Supreme Lord. It comprises 1/4 of the Lord's energy, as confirmed in the Bhagavad Gita, Ekam Shenas Tato Jagat. The cosmic manifestation of the illusory energy is material nature, and everything within material nature is made of matter. Therefore, one should not try to compare the expansions of material nature to the Chaturvyuha, the quadruple expansions of the personality of Godhead, but unfortunately the Mayavadi school unreasonably attempts to do this. Everyone okay? 4. To answer Shankaracharya's commentary on Vedanta Sutra 2.2.45, the substance of the transcendental qualities and their spiritual nature is described in the Laghu Bhagavatamrita as follows. Some say that transcendence must be void of all qualities because qualities are manifested only in matter. According to them, all qualities are like temporary flickering images. But this is not acceptable. Since the Supreme Personality of Godhead is absolute, his qualities are non-different from him. His form, name, qualities, and everything else pertaining to him are also spiritual as he is, are as spiritual as he is. Every qualitative expansion of the absolute personality of Godhead is identical with him. Since the absolute truth, the personality of Godhead, is the reservoir of all pleasure, All the transcendental qualities that expand from him are also reservoirs of pleasure. This is confirmed in the scripture known as Brahmatarka, which states that the Supreme Lord Hari is qualified by himself, and therefore Vishnu and his pure devotees and their transcendental qualities cannot be different from their persons. In the Vishnu Purana, Lord Vishnu is worshipped in the following words, quote, "Let the Supreme Personality of Godhead be merciful towards us. His existence is never infected by material qualities." In the same Vishnu Purana, it is also said that all the qualities attributed to the Supreme Lord, such as knowledge, opulence, beauty, strength, and influence, are known to be non-different from him. This is also confirmed in the Padma Purana, which explains that whatever the Supreme Lord is described as having, whenever he's described as having no qualities, this should be understood to indicate that he is devoid of material qualities. In the first chapter of Srimad Bhagavatam, 1:16-29, it is said, "O Dharma, protector of religious principles, all noble and sublime qualities are eternally..." Can we have that? 1:16-29. In this first chapter of the Srimad Bhagavatam, 1:69-29, it is said, "O Dharma, protector of religious principles, all noble and sublime qualities are eternally manifested in the person of Krishna. And devotees and transcendentalists who aspire to become faithful also desire to possess such transcendental qualities." It is therefore to be understood that Lord Sri Krishna, the transcendental form of absolute bliss, is the fountainhead of all pleasurable transcendental qualities and inconceivable potencies. In this connection, we may recommend references to Srimad Bhagavatam, 3rd Canto, chapter 26, verses 21, 25, 27, and 28. Here it is, the qualities of Lord Krishna mentioned in the 1st Canto, 16th chapter, text number 29. Actually, text number 30. 26 through 30. "In him reside truthfulness, 2, cleanliness, 3, intolerance of another's unhappiness, 4, the power to control anger, 5, self-satisfaction, 6, straightforwardness, 7, steadiness of mind, 8, control of the sense organs, 9, responsibility, 10, equality, 11, tolerance, 12, equanimity, 13, faithfulness, 14, knowledge, 15, absence of sense enjoyment, 16, leadership, 17, chivalry, 18, influence, 19, the power to make everything possible, 20, the discharge of proper duty, 21, complete independence, 22, dexterity, 23, fullness in all beauty, 24, serenity, 25, kind-heartedness, 26, ingenuity, 27, gentility, 28, magnanimity, 29, determination. What was 28? 30, perfection in all knowledge. 31, proper execution. 32, possession of all objects of enjoyment. 33, joyfulness. 34, immovability. 35, fidelity. 36, fame. 37, worship. 38, pridelessness. 39, being as the Supreme Personality of Godhead. 40, eternity, and many other transcendental qualities which are eternally present and never to be separated from him. That personality of Godhead, the reservoir of all goodness and beauty, Lord Sri Krishna has now closed his transcendental pastimes in the face of the earth. In his absence, the age of Kali has spread its influence everywhere, so I'm sorry to see this condition of existence. In its absence, in his absence, the age of Kali has spread its influence everywhere. You can see why, because if the little jivas don't have the opportunity to hear about the Supreme Personality of Godhead and to experience these qualities, then they have to go elsewhere, and they scatter throughout the material world trying to find it in other places and become bewildered. That's why they have to hear about the Supreme Personality of Godhead. It's nice to have all these books, huh? Shripad Ramanujacharya ki, has also refuted the arguments of Shankara in his own commentary on the Vedanta Sutra, which is known as the Sri Bhashya. Sripad Shankaracharya has tried to equate the Pancharatras with the philosophy of the atheist Kapila, and thus he has tried to prove that the Pancharatras contradict the Vedic injunctions. The Pancharatras state that the personality of Jiva, called Sankarshana, has emerged from Vasudeva, the supreme cause of all causes, that Pradyumna, the mind, has come from Sankarshana, and that Aniruddha, the ego, has come from Pradyumna. But one cannot say that the living entity Jiva takes birth or is created, for such a statement is against the injunction of the Vedas. As stated in the Katha Upanishad 2.18, living entities as individual spirit souls can have neither birth nor death. All Vedic literature declares that the living entities are eternal. Therefore, when it is said that Sankarshan is Jiva, this indicates that he is the predominating deity of the living entities. Similarly, Pradyumna is the predominating deity of the mind, and Aniruddha is the predominating deity of the ego. It has been said that Pradyumna, the mind, was produced from Sankarshana, but if Sankarshana were a living entity, this could not be accepted, because a living entity cannot be the cause of the mind. The Vedic injunctions state that everything, including life, mind, and senses, come from the Supreme Personality of Godhead. It is impossible for the mind to be produced by a living entity, for the Vedas state that everything comes from the Absolute Truth, the Supreme Lord. Sankarshan, Pradyumna, and Aniruddha have all the potent features of the Absolute Personality of Godhead according to the revealed scriptures, which contain undeniable facts that no one can refute. Therefore, these members of the quadruple manifestation are never to be considered ordinary living beings. Each of them is a plenary expansion of the Absolute Godhead. And thus each is identical with the Supreme Lord in knowledge, opulence, energy, influence, prowess, and potencies. The evidence of the Pancharatras cannot be neglected. Only untrained persons who have not genuinely studied the Pancharatras think that the Pancharatras contradict the Shrutis regarding the birth or beginning of the living entity. In this connection, we must accept the verdict of Srimad Bhagavatam, which says, quote, the Absolute Personality of Godhead, who is known as Vasudeva, and who is very affectionate towards his surrendered devotees, expands himself in quadruple forms who are subordinate to him and at the same time identical with him in all respects. The Paushkara Samhita, the which Samhita? Yeah, you can tell people that you know something from the Paushkara Samhita. States the scriptures that recommend the Brahmanas worship the quadruple forms of the Supreme Personality of Godhead are called agamas, authorized Vedic literatures. In all Vaishnava literature, it is said that worshiping these quadruple forms is as good as worshiping the Supreme Personality of Godhead, Vasudeva, who in his different expansions, complete in 6 opulences, can accept offerings from his devotees of the results of their perfected duties. Worshipping the expansions for pastimes, such as Nrsimha, Rama, Shesha, and Kurma, promotes one to the worship of the Sankarshan quadruple. From that position, one is raised to the platform of worshipping Vasudeva, the Supreme Brahman. In the Paushkara Samhita, it is said, if one fully worships according to the regulated principles, one can attain the Supreme Personality of Godhead, Vasudeva. It is to be accepted that Sankarshan, Pradyumna, and Aniruddha are as good as Lord Vasudeva, for they all have inconceivable power and can accept transcendental forms like Vasudeva. Sankarshan, Pradyumna, and Aniruddha are never born, but they can manifest themselves in various incarnations before the eyes of pure devotees. This is the conclusion of all Vedic literature. That the Lord can manifest himself before his devotees by his inconceivable power is not against the teaching of the Pancharatras. Since Sankarshan, Pradyumna, and Aniruddha are respectively the predominating deities of the living entities, the total mind and the total ego, the designation of Sankarshan, Pradyumna, and Aniruddha as Jiva mind, and ego are never contradictory to the statements of the scriptures. These terms identify these deities just as the terms sky and light sometimes identify the absolute Brahman. The scriptures completely deny the birth or production of the living entity. In the Parama Samhita, it is described that material nature, which is used for others' purposes, is factually inert and always subject to transformation. The field of material nature is the arena of the activities of fruitive actors, and since the material field is externally related with the Supreme Personality of Godhead, it is also eternal. In every Samhita, the jiva, living entity, has been accepted as eternal, and in the Pancharatras, the birth of the jiva is completely denied. Anything that is produced must be annihilated. Therefore, if we accept the birth of the living entity, we also have to accept its annihilation. But since the Vedic literatures say that the living entity is eternal, one should not think the living entity to be produced at a certain time. In the creation of the Parama Samhita, in the beginning of the Parama Samhita, it is definitely stated that the face of material nature is constantly changeable. Therefore, beginning, annihilation, and all such terms are applicable only to the material nature. Considering all these points, one should understand that Shankaracharya's statement that Shankarshan is born as a jiva is completely against the Vedic statements. His assertions are completely refuted by the above arguments. In this connection, the commentary of Sridhar Swami on Srimad Bhagavatam 3.134 is very helpful. For a detailed refutation of Shankaracharya's arguments attempting to prove Shankarshan as an ordinary living being, one may refer to Srimad Sudarshanacharya's commentary on the Sri Bhashya, which is known as Shruta Prakashika. Do you have that? See about that. We should have a library. Wouldn't it be nice? Put it on your list. Make a library. I mean, we have a bookcase, but that's nice. But we should have a full library of all the previous acharyas and everything like that. Also, the devotees in Vrindavan, there's a Sanskrit school there. It was founded by Gopi Puranadana Prabhu, and Gopal Bhatta Prabhu has been a great supporter of that school and helped it to get started. They were at Govardhan, and then they moved over to Vrindavan. They produced the recent Tattva Sandarbha, and they have many other books which are coming out, including the Laghu Bhagavatamrita, which was completed by Gopi Puranadana Prabhu. And they're Sanskritists and Brahmanas. And the only thing is they're not businessmen. And so they wrote to me a couple days ago because I offered help because I really like their program. I wanted to see that they have success in propagating their books. The Brihat Bhagavatamrita is an important book that Prabhupada mentions in his own commentaries, that devotees who want to know all about devotional service should read this book and so forth. And it was painstakingly produced by that school. Gopi Puranadana Prabhu, Jayadvaita Swami, Keshava Bharati Maharaj worked together to produce an impeccable version of the Brihat Bhagavatamrita, complete with Sanatana Goswami's commentary, meticulously done. And it hasn't been widely distributed because there was not a very good marketing of that book, which is a shame. And so they wrote to me saying, can you help us? And I'd like to help them. There's a lot of ideas that they have in there. So there's some ways we can talk about this. They need to move their books over, at least a quantity of them, to America, and then have a way to have them stored. And so I'm looking for storage space, and also devotees who are interested in maybe overseeing getting them sent out to people who order them in different places. I know that's a tall order, but I'm just putting it out there into the ether because we could form a team and help propagate this branch of Prabhupada's campaign, which is to have the full canon of Gaudiya Vaishnava literatures available to the world. And it's a very important point that Prabhupada instilled in the devotees this qualification to be able to produce such works. And nowhere else are they being produced in such a meticulous way and through the training of those who were trained directly by Prabhupada and so forth. So it's very important. So there. Continuing. And congratulations to all of you who have attended this yajna. It's like at Naimasaranya, the sages came together to hear and to talk about Krishna, and that's what we've come here today to do today. And I doubt if anybody else, any CEO of Google or anyone else, read this purport today. The original quadruple forms Krishna, Baladev, Pradyumna, and Aniruddha expand into another quadruple, which is present in the Vaikuntha planets of the spiritual sky. Therefore, the quadruple forms in the spiritual sky are the second manifestation of the original quadruple in Dwarka. As explained above, Vasudeva, Sankarshan, Pradyumna, and Aniruddha are all changeless, transcendental plenary expansions of the Supreme Lord who have no relation to the material modes. The Sankarshan form in the second quadruple is not only a representation of Balaram, but also the original cause of the causal ocean, where Karnadakshay Vishnu lies asleep, breathing out the seeds of innumerable universes. In the spiritual sky, there is a spiritual creative energy technically called Shuddha Sattva, which is a pure spiritual energy that sustains all the Vaikuntha planets with the full opulences of knowledge, wealth, prowess, etc. All these actions of Shuddha Sattva display the potency of Mahasankarshan, who is the ultimate reservoir of all individual living entities who are suffering in the material world. When the cosmic creation is annihilated, the living entities who are indestructible by nature rest in the body of Mahasankarshan. Sankarshan is therefore sometimes called the total jiva. As spiritual sparks, the living entities have the tendency to be inactive in the association of material energy, just as sparks of a fire have the tendency to be extinguished as soon as they leave the fire. The spiritual nature of the living being can be rekindled, however, in association with the Supreme Being. Because the living being can appear either in matter or in spirit, the jiva is called the marginal potency. Sankarshan is the origin of Karna Vishnu, who is the original form who creates the universes. And that Sankarshan is but a plenary expansion of Sri Nityananda Ram. Give yourselves a hand for going through, listening carefully, attentively to the longest purport in Srila Prabhupada's books. Taha yera mera rupa mahasankarshan chit shakti ashray teho karanera karan. There in the spiritual sky, the personal feature of Balaram, called Mahasankarshan, is the shelter of the spiritual energy. He is the primary cause, the cause of all causes. One variety of the pastimes of the spiritual energy is described as pure goodness, Vishuddha Sattva. It comprises all the abodes of Vaikuntha. The 6 attributes are all spiritual. Know for certain that they are all manifestations of the opulence of Sankarsana. There is one marginal potency known as the jiva. Mahasankarshan is the shelter of all jivas. Sankarshan is the original shelter of the Purusha, from whom this world is created and in whom it is dissolved. He, Sankarshana, is the shelter of everything. He is wonderful in every respect, and his opulences are infinite. Even Ananta cannot describe his glory. That Sankarshan, who is transcendental pure goodness, is a partial expansion of Nityananda Balaram. I have briefly explained the 8th verse. Now please listen with attention as I explain the 9th verse. Maya Bharta Janda Sangha Shrayanga Sheti Sakshat Karanam Bodhi Madhye Yasyai Kamsha Shripumanadi Devas Tamshi Nityananda Ramam Prapadye. I offer my full obeisances under the feet of Sri Nityananda Ram, whose partial representation called Karnadakshai Vishnu lying on the Karna ocean is the original Purusha, the master of the illusory energy and the shelter of all the universes. Outside the Vaikuntha planets is the impersonal Brahman effulgence, and beyond that effulgence is the Karna ocean, or causal ocean. Purport. The impersonal glowing effulgence known as impersonal Brahman is the outer space of the Vaikuntha planets in the spiritual sky. Beyond that impersonal Brahman is the great causal ocean which lies between the material and spiritual skies. The material nature is a byproduct of this causal ocean. Karnadakshai Vishnu, who lies on the causal ocean, creates the universes merely by glancing upon material nature. Therefore, Krishna personally has nothing to do with the material creation. The Bhagavad Gita confirms that the Lord glances over material nature, and thus she produces the many material universes. Verse. The Bhagavad Gita confirms that the Lord glances over material nature. That's it. Maya dakshena prakritihi suyate sacharacharam hetunanena konteya jagad viparivartate. Neither Krishna in Goloka nor Narayan in Vaikuntha comes directly in contact with the material creation. They are completely aloof from material energy. What is the verse from the Brahma Samhita that says that? I'll give you a hint. It's in the beginning. Can you give them the verse? No. You have it? Could you give it to us, please? Oh, you're giving it to me? Okay. Number 7, 5-7, 5th chapter, 7th verse. Maya yara mamanasya naviyogas tayasaha atmana ramaya reme tyakva kalam sashikshaya. Krishna never consorts with this illusory energy. Still, her connection is not entirely cut off from the absolute truth. When he intends to create the material world, the amorous pastime in which he engages by consorting with his own spiritual chit potency, Rama, by casting his glance at the deluding energy in the shape of sending his time energy, is an auxiliary activity. And actually, I was thinking of another verse, I think. And it's the one before that, number 6. Evam Jyotir Mayo Deva Sad Ananda Parapara Atma Ramastyatasyasti Prakrityana Samagamaha. The Lord of Gokula is the transcendental supreme Godhead, his own self, the own self of eternal ecstasies. He is the superior of all superiors and is busily engaged in the enjoyments of the transcendental realm and has no association with his mundane potency. So both verses are good. 6 and 7, Brahma Samhita you can quote at any time to show how the Lord has no connection to the material energy. Neither Krishna in Goloka nor Narayan in Vaikuntha comes directly in contact with the material creation. They are completely aloof from the material energy. How would you prove that from Shastra? Which verses would you quote? 6 and 7 from which chapter of the Brahma Samhita? Okay. It is the function of Mahasankarshan in the form of Karnadakshai Vishnu to glance over the material creation which is situated beyond the limits of the causal ocean. Material nature is connected with the personality of Godhead by his glance over her and nothing more. It is said that she is impregnated by the energy of his glance. The material energy Maya never even touches the causal ocean, for the Lord's glance focuses upon her from a great distance away. The glancing power of the Lord agitates the entire cosmic energy, and thus its actions begin at once. This indicates that matter, however powerful she may be, has no power by herself. Her activity begins by the grace of the Lord, and then the entire cosmic creation is manifested in a systematic way. The analogy of a woman's conception can help us understand this subject to a certain extent. The mother is passive, but the father puts his energy within the mother, and thus she conceives. She supplies the ingredients for the birth of the child in her womb. Similarly, the Lord activates material nature, which then supplies the ingredients for cosmic development. Material nature has two different phases. The aspect called pradhan supplies the material ingredients for cosmic development, and the aspect called maya causes the manifestation of her ingredients, which are temporary, like foam in the ocean. In reality, the temporary manifestations of material nature are originally caused by the spiritual glance of the Lord. The personality of Godhead is the direct or remote cause of creation, and material nature is the indirect or immediate cause. Materialistic scientists, puffed up by the magical changes their so-called inventions have brought about, cannot see the real potency of Godhead behind matter. Therefore, the jugglery of science is gradually leading people to a godless civilization at the cost of the goal of human life. Having missed the goal of life, materialists run after self-sufficiency, not knowing that material nature is already self-sufficient by the grace of God, thus creating a colossal hoax in the name of civilization. They create an imbalance in the natural self-sufficiency of material nature. To think of material nature as all in all, not knowing the original cause, is ignorance. Lord Caitanya appeared in order to dissipate this darkness of ignorance by igniting the spark of spiritual life that can, by his causeless mercy, enlighten the entire world. To explain how Maya acts by Krishna's power, the author of Sri Caitanya Caritamrta gives the analogy of an iron rod in a fire. Although the rod is not fire, it becomes red hot and acts like fire itself. Similarly, all the actions and reactions of material nature are not actually the work of material nature, but are actions and reactions of the energy of the Supreme Lord manifested through matter. The power of electricity is transmitted through the medium of copper, but this does not mean that the copper is electricity. The power is generated at a powerhouse under the control of an expert living being. Similarly, behind the jugglery of the natural laws is a great living being who is a person like the mechanical engineer in the powerhouse. It is by his intelligence that the entire cosmic creation moves in a systematic way. The modes of nature which directly cause material actions are also originally activated by Narayan. A simple analogy will explain how this is so. When a potter manufactures a pot from clay, the potter's wheel, his tools, and the clay are the immediate cause of the pot, but the potter is the chief cause. Similarly, Narayan is the chief cause of all material creations, and the material energy supplies the ingredients of matter. Therefore, without Narayan, all other causes are useless, just as the potter's wheel and tools are useless without the potter himself. Since materialistic scientists ignore the personality of God, it is as if they were connected with the potter's wheel and its rotation. It is as if they were connected with the potter's wheel and its rotation, the potter's tools and the ingredients for the pot, but had no knowledge of the potter himself. Therefore, modern science has created an imperfect, godless civilization that is in gross ignorance of the ultimate cause. Scientific advancement should not have a great goal to attain. scientific advancement should have a great goal to attain, and that great goal should be the personality of Godhead. In the Bhagavad Gita, it is said that after conducting research for many, many births, great men of knowledge who stress the importance of experimental thought can know the personality of Godhead, who is the cause of all causes. When one knows Him perfectly, one surrenders unto Him and then becomes a Mahatma. That's simple, right? Easy. 52. Surrounding Vaikuntha is a mass of water that is endless, unfathomed, and unlimited. Yes?
This is related to the previous big purport that we read. It's just that suppose if a foolish person or a dog is barking at the sun, and if we are talking about the sun, we don't talk about all the people who are blaspheming the sun or whatever it is like that. The personal concept of God is so great, and it is a fact that it feels so nice when we hear about how God is a person, His nature, activities and all that. But why is that our acharyas put so much, it's so dry to hear about the impersonal concept. So why is that emphasized and explained and refuted with giving so much stress, why, if it is so insignificant?
Refuting the external...
The impersonalism concept, if it is so insignificant.
Well, it's not that it's insignificant in the sense that it's at the expense of the personal form of God. It's not that they're saying that there's the impersonal form of God and there's the personal form of God. They're saying that there is no personal form of God. And that's when the acharyas take great exception, because then people are misled into atheism. And materialism is the only recourse for one who has no clear conception of who God is. Because unless you have spiritual variety and activities within spiritual variety, you necessarily have to engage in material varieties, and then you're lost in the material world. So Sankaracharya has purposefully misinterpreted Mayavadam Asat Shastram. What is it? Prachanam Bhaudam Uchate Mayaiva Vihitam Devi Kalo Brahmana Murtina. In the age of Kali Yuga, a Brahmana will appear to misinterpret the Shastras in such a way, kind of like covered atheism, and in that way it will mislead people. Page 376 in your pink shloka book for those who are keeping score. And for those who don't have a pink shloka book, you can now order one. Who is it who's supplying? Jay Prabhu is the supplier of pink shloka books available to everyone who wants one. Krishna. Thank you. And for those of you who have joined us online, we're delighted. Thank you very much. And your text-in number, in case you would like to text in, is 650-245-7018, 650-245-7018. If you have any comments about today's reading, please text in. Thank you. We have two texts. Go ahead. Okay, and 270 is this? 376. We'll have a look at this verse. I'll say, please repeat. Mayavadam asachastram prachanam bhaunam uchyate mayaiva vihitam devi kalo brahmana murtina. From the Padma Purana, Lord Shiva informed the goddess Durga, the superintendent of the material world, in the age of Kali, I take the form of a Brahmana and explain the Vedas through false scriptures in an atheistic way, similar to the Buddhist philosophy. That's cause for alarm. Amongst the acharyas, they specifically give clear explanations to refute all the details of these misinterpretations by the various philosophers who exclude the personality of Godhead from their interpretations of the Vedas. There's the Shad Darshan, the 6 philosophies of India, which you'll find also threads of those available in the world today as well. And originally they were like different departments in a university explaining the same thing, but then through the corruption in the age of Kali, they became deviant to the original explanation. Vyasadeva in his Vedanta Sutra has therefore refuted by logic and scriptural authority the various deviations of these various darshans, like the Karma Mimamsa and the Patanjali's Yoga Sutra and the Vaisheshika. I need to be refuted. Philosophy of Kannada and so forth. You were going to say?
Yes, Prabhuji. So now I understand that it is significant because it's defying the Lord's personal form. But when we read, should we pay so much attention to understand these details? Because even if we chant, does it mean that do we have impersonalism? Is that why Prabhupada also refutes? Because we don't know anything about God. So
yeah, it's important to hear and understand all these things. So you should make a study of them. What else are you going to do? I mean, there's a lot of time left. I got 534 more days until I turn 60. So what am I going to do in those 534 more days? Take away 6 hours a night at sleeping. Still leaves me with about 500. Anyway, pastimes? Yeah, it's important to understand these, hear these philosophies and apply them, especially the ones Prabhupada has painstakingly presented in his books, and for representing Krishna consciousness to others. You may be surprised how much it will not only just fortify you in your enthusiasm to present the Supreme Personality of God to others, even if these things don't come up in Silicon Valley and people say, what about the Chaturvyuha? I heard that, Sankarshan is actually a jiva and things like that. That may not come up, but your knowledge that the acharyas have gone to great lengths to refute these things and that there are logical arguments, even if you don't assimilate all of them, it has a strengthening effect on your own consciousness. And therefore, Kaviraj Goswami said earlier, Siddhanta Bolya Chitana Kara Alash, Krishna Lagi Sudrid Manash, that don't be alash, don't be aloof or lazy when it comes to going through the Siddhanta and hearing all these different points. Because as you hear them, your mind will become strengthened because you'll say, oh, okay, I understand Krishna is the Supreme Personality of God. If you just hear Leela all the time, you may make the mistake that, well, Krishna is an ordinary person, he's just like me. There may be some element of that misunderstanding that's still there. Because after all, the central reason for the material world, or the primary cause, is that everyone wants to be God and is envious of God to some degree. Icha dvesha samutena dvandva mohena bharata sarva bhutani sammoham sarge yanti parantapa. This is an affliction of the material condition. And that can be alleviated by hearing these things. Harivangsha, Prabhu.
Thank you, Prabhuji. Does this also apply to the descriptions about our universe and astronomical related things in the 5th canto as well?
Well, you have to see that in context of the conversation itself. Because when he was asked, Shukadeva Goswami said that I will give you a sampling of the material nature just to show you how inconceivable and unlimited it is. He wasn't saying, I'm giving you this so that you'll have a complete, detailed, accurate understanding of how everything works in the whole universe. But he was saying that this is going to boggle your mind. Just the little fragment that I'm going to explain to you now, you're not going to be able to find on Google Maps a lot of these things. They're going to be, as a good friend of mine said, you're not going to be able to find these things or conceive of them. And that's not our particular ken to go through, to present these things. Maybe devotees who are specifically preaching to people about, the different aspects of the universe and things, but then there's a question about whether taking a stand on particular geographical locations, so to speak, of various points may be completely effective. We should have an understanding, however, that material nature is inconceivable and that there is a structure of the universe that is not ascertainable by the blunt material senses. There are certain things you just can't see, but they're explained in the Shastra. Okay? All right. Anything else? Sure, there's other stuff. Yes.
Maharaj, it's sometimes, there are so many, Lord Shiva is a pure devotee, and he's actually propagating, he's actually telling this to his consort that he's going to misguide the people.
Right.
And also there was an explanation on why this is being done under the sanction of the Lord. In the purport we read that it is to actually bewilder the people who want to be bewildered, right? Is that the correct understanding? Because I'm thinking that the Lord sanctions such deviant things to come into place, and also the Lord actually empowers the different acharyas to remove this deviation. So
it's free will. Everyone has their choice, and if they're going to be free will, there has to be choice. So if they want to have bewilderment, Krishna's got to execute and provide that bewilderment for them. So he does. If they want other paths besides the direct path of bhakti, Krishna will arrange for those and also empower people. In fact, I mentioned this in the commentary in the 6th canto of the Srimad Bhagavatam. Vishwanath Chakravarti Thakur says that not all devotees in one lifetime or in this same lifetime come to the perfectional stage of chanting. They achieve it just after they leave the body. And Krishna arranges for that because he doesn't want to bewilder or discourage people who have taken to other indirect paths as their desire and so forth. And at the same time, Krishna achieves many purposes or achieves many ends by performing one activity. So there may be many other things going on at the same time. As he's giving an alternative path, he's also, giving the remedy, in the form of the teachings of the acharyas and so many other ways, so that people can come to the perfect stage. Srivas Prabhu. Yeah, please.
Also, Prabhuji, it can be again inconceivable why the Lord came as Lord Buddha just to you can say abolish the authority of Vedas, because he had the animal killing, and then he sent Shankaracharya to remove Buddhism, which was rampant in India, right? To give a similar philosophy as Buddhist philosophy, but to re-establish the authority of Vedas, and the subsequent acharyas, they came and to kind of establish it. So in that sense it is a little inconceivable, but that was Lord's plan, and that kind of unfolded. He came as Buddha, he removed the authorities of Vedas, and then Shankaracharya came, he re-established, but with a slight twist on Buddhist philosophy, and then Ramanujacharya came, and then Madhvacharya, and then in that way we get the full circle back as far as the authority of the Vedas go.
Yeah, and that's what I meant by he may have many different there's a lot going on at the same time. Now, anyone who's been a manager knows that solutions are not just black and white. There are many shades of gray, and nowadays, because of computers, there are millions of different shades of colors and so forth. And when you're dealing with living entities who are all independent and have free will, well, they have minute independence, and they have their own preferences and predilections because of previous lives and so forth. Imagine, I mean, if you just deal with a small family with 2 kids or something like that, and they have different ideas about what they want to do during the day and during their life and everything like that. How hard that is to manage. One living entity, 2 living entities, 3, family of 7, everyone goes, how'd you do it? And Krishna's managing unlimited living entities. So they're all going in different directions. They all want different things. So now he has to make all these arrangements. And only he can do that. Nityo nityanam chetanas chetananam eko bahunam yo viditati kaman. He's supplying whatever, the living entities, not just food, but also according to all their desires. Whatever myriad desires they have, he's fulfilling them simultaneously, and they all intersect with others. And the karma is also perfectly executed. One gets what one deserves, and how does that one connect to this one? Only Krishna knows that. You can't fathom those kinds of things. And so when he enacts a pastime like bewildering people through this, managers know that there's certain ways that you have to, sometimes present one thing in order to get a different result and so forth. Politicians know this too. There's all kinds of ways that, throughout history there have been campaigns meant to bring about an ultimate result that began with obfuscation of the, the complete truth to start with. The Nixon administration, Reagan administration, we can name all the administrations. Okay, go ahead.
Yeah, I'm a manager, by the way.
So you can relate.
Yeah.
Okay.
No, I was just thinking that sometimes the proponents of the Abrahamic religions, they actually criticize this Vedic school, saying that, okay, there are so many different paths, they're all contradictory. But now, by what you have said, it seems that, okay, this is not actually criticism, it is actually the more complete thing, where it is not actually just, where it is affording different things to different people and catering to the free will of a person as well, right? If you want to follow, you follow. If you want to get confused and be bewildered, okay, for that also there is a way, right?
Yeah.
So it looks to be more complete, and it is not something to be criticized, criticized for, right?
Yeah, that's the criticism of a person who takes a mathematics class, and then they walk to the other wing of the building one day during lunch break, and they walk by the trigonometry class, and they're drawing arrows on the board, and then that's stupid. That's really stupid. And they go back to the class, their mathematics class, 2 + 2 is 4, and they say, bunch of idiots down there. They don't even know anything about mathematics, just arrows and circles and things like that. It's like crazy. So similarly, somebody with a preliminary understanding of what is religion and so forth, the sophistication of the philosophy of the Vedas, which we're hearing about, the detail that the acharyas go into and which the Shastra presents, and there are explanations for all these things. It's not that it's just random and it's left for us to sort out. There's a system. There's a siddhanta. It means there's a thesis, antithesis, and synthesis. And all these things are going on in such a way that we can ultimately come to the truth, which for our sake is condensed, especially in this age, into the Bhagavad Gita, Srimad Bhagavatam, and so forth. And then Krishna says, Vedanta vit, Vedanta krit, Veda aham. I am the goal of all these things. And then it comes down to just chant Hare Krishna. And of course, that's fine. You can just do that. If you can just do that, it's fine also. But who's just chanting Hare Krishna? There's also, according to Thakur Haridas, an importance in having, along with one's initiation into the chanting of the holy name, one should have sambandha gyan. Without that, there's the diksha, and then there's the shiksha. And both are necessary. It's like you say, which is more important, planting the seed or watering the seed? They're equally important. The diksha and the shiksha are equally important. And sometimes people say, well, you're in a shiksha parampara. Therefore, no need for diksha. Just shiksha all the time. But they don't understand the context. At the time, Bhaktivinoda Thakur and Srila Bhaktisiddhanta were stressing a shiksha parampara. There were members of Nityananda Prabhu's own family. They were just saying, all you need is diksha, and it has to be in our family. Otherwise, you're nothing. And therefore, at that particular time in history, they stressed the shiksha in order to counteract that. And another time, there may be necessity to point out, no, you have to have diksha also. So, not only, various religious traditions that don't have the perspective, also within our own tradition, there are people, even who are part of, who are consider themselves followers of Prabhupada, who don't take a perspective that allows them to present anything else but fanaticism. And that's not helpful. It's not helpful. What's helpful is getting the entire perspective, understanding why we're doing certain things, and that requires hearing and understanding over time. Then one's inspired, as Krishnadas Kaviraj Goswami says, to chant Hare Krishna, because one has a very clear, distinct understanding. Sudrid mana, she says, the mind is fixed. It says, this is it. There is nothing else but chanting Hare Krishna. If you think, if the mind thinks there's something else to do, it'll go do that. But if you're convinced by your intelligence there's nothing else to do but chanting Hare Krishna, it fulfills everything, and Krishna is everything. And you've just heard these chapters, it all contributes to that Sudrid Manash, and one's able to perform devotional service in an unwavering way. It's a rare thing, actually, for somebody to come to this position of nishta, of no hesitation in their devotional practice, no doubts. They're free to simply perform devotional service. It requires Tachchadadhana munayo jnana vairagya yuktaya pashyantyatmani chatmanam bhaktya shuta grihitaya. It must be done thoughtfully, says Sutta Goswami. It has to be done, it's done by thoughtful people. And they have to be fortified with jnana and vairagya, which come from hearing the Vedanta Shruti very carefully. So we don't have that much to hear. I mean, we don't have that many things to hear. I mean, that's the nature of the age of Kali Yuga. It's like, this seems like a lot sometimes, but it's not. I mean, the Vedic process was to hear constantly, from the time you're born, before you're born, and continue hearing until you memorize the whole Veda that you're responsible for, and you know the whole thing, all the syllables and everything. It has to be the perfect intonation and everything like that. And nowadays, you want to read a little something? Not right now. I'm in a hurry. I have to go make money, or whatever it is. There's always something in the age of Kali that's distracting from this. So that's why Prabhupada created these sanctuaries and encouraged us, to come together and just hear and chant, hear and chant, hear and chant. And then you become fortified, and then you're able to carry it on wherever you go. No distraction when you go outside, because you're determined. You know that this is your greatest interest in life, and so forth. Yes. Oh, right. We have some texts that have come in. Oh, right. It was your turn. You've been raising your hand for half an hour. Go right ahead.
Thank you. So I just have a follow-up question on the free will and this Lord Shiva's comment here. So the principle of the unconditioned versus conditioned soul applies to the kind of grown-up people who know the difference between going to pub versus coming to this temple to listen to a lecture. But what about a small kid, like she's a 10-year-old kid, she's fortunate enough person to be here with her parents. But what about another kid sitting somewhere else with some other people, and then on the top of that, they are supernatural powers who are claiming that they want to bewilder that other 10-year-old kid. So is it the fault of that other kid who is not able to come here? Whose fault is that?
I didn't get it.
So I'm just trying to compare this kid who is fortunate enough to come here to listen to all these lectures.
Talking about you, Avantika.
But there are other people in the world, and they are not grown-ups like
Yeah.
us who know what's wrong and what's right. They are just neutral kids. They
Right.
don't know anything. And then they are being bewildered by supernatural powers who is himself claiming that I will mislead the people.
Okay.
So is it justified that a small kid who doesn't know anything about the world, good or bad, is being misled by other people? I mean, kind of supernatural powers, Lord Shiva himself, or Maya Devi?
Well, people, whatever age they're in, are never misled when they are sincere. And Krishna's looking out for every living entity. He's there within the heart. He's monitoring the situation. And, you know, so it's amazing that living entities at any age, they can go through. I mean, I see people that come to ISKCON, for instance, and if you go on the internet, there's all kinds of different ideas about what ISKCON is, what it isn't, what you should do, what you shouldn't do, and so forth. And somehow or other, some people make it through all that, and they're able to have a normal spiritual life. How are they able to do that? And other people, they immediately get caught on some point, and then they say, okay, I can't do it, forget it. You know, because they have a certain momentum from a previous life, they have a predilection, you know, based on their previous practices and so forth. They have a certain level of sincerity, you know, to get through certain things. And living entities at all ages are being guided by Krishna from within the heart. So it's not that they're simply vulnerable to everything. It's based on on their psychophysiological nature and their spiritual credit, which they've attained in previous ages, previous births and so forth, to be able to be either vulnerable or impervious to certain kinds of philosophy and so forth. It's not that everyone is simply exposed to all these things and there's no antidote and there's no remedy. There is. That's completely available too. Just as there is a bewildering principle, the principle of enlightenment is available to every living entity, no matter what age they are. Prahlad Maharaj was 5 years old, and so was Narada Muni, Dhruva. Hey, a lot of kids. And they were able to, Prahlad Maharaj was exposed to extreme, propaganda by his parents and by his teachers and so forth, and he wasn't affected by it at all. And let's speak of grown-ups. Sometimes, you see sometimes people, they become misled very easily because of their state of heart. They want to be misled, and other people aren't. Jiva's not left unprotected. If he wants Krishna, he can get him. Okay, the two from the...
I was just going to add something to what Vittal Prabhu was saying about completeness. So, when you try to learn a word in the dictionary, you go to the dictionary, it gives you the meaning of the word and also gives you the antonyms. And also says you can get confused by this and gives you some more words. So I was kind of just trying to draw parallels as Prabhupada is teaching us this philosophy and also telling us about the other philosophy that you could get confused and misled by that. And also in the Ishopanishad it says Vidyamcha, says you have to learn both of them side by side. So I was just thinking.
Yeah, and I was just thinking also, this is a good reason for you to preach. Yes. The devotees do lose sleep over these types of things. Like Advaita Acharya was losing sleep over the fact that people were not getting Krishna consciousness. There were all kinds of rituals going on, worshipping snakes and crazy demigods. And Prabhupada even mentions in the book someplace people worship Hitler. They worship the god of smallpox. Really, they have that. I met some guy at the front of when we were doing these Walmarts You know, one day I was shown a book, he had this really heavy look in his eye, and he said, I'll show you who I worship. He showed me a picture of Shani. He said, I worship Shani. I was like, okay, you better take the Gita. So you should lose sleep over all these kids who are not getting Krishna consciousness, and, you know, help to propagate Krishna consciousness as much as you can. That will help to ameliorate Maya. Okay, were you finished with your points?
Yes.
Okay, with 2 texts.
Yeah, and now they become 5.
And now they become 5. Let's go through them.
So what I'll do is,
Then we'll finish.
some of them are general comments and
Okay.
haribols. I'll do that in the interest of time, and then I will bring up the question from
Please.
Bhumi Mataji. So there's a haribol from Memphis in Tennessee. We are Bhaktin Kara, Middleton. She
Jai,
sang a
Bhakti
haribol,
Kara in Tennessee.
and so did Pratibha Mataji. And
Pratibha in Sacramento.
Sacramento, yeah. And Linda, Bhaktin Linda also. She's
Bhakti
also,
Linda, Hare Krishna.
she's also sending compliments. And our Vrindavan Priya Prabhu, he also says that, you know, this longest,
Vrindavan Priya, Haribo.
the longest purport was awesome. And Sudhi Prabhu also says this haribol.
He's a physicist from Stanford, so.
He's enjoying it, yeah. So Bhumi Mataji's text actually came a long time ago, and I was telling her that when we open
Sorry,
up for
Bhumi.
questions,
Okay, go ahead.
I will call that. So this is a question from the time that you were talking about the fall of Jay and Vijay. And I'm going to read that verbatim from here. I have a question about the fall of the jiva. Uh-oh.
Sure, we'll take that up right now in the last 2 minutes.
Been getting confusing information from different devotees. I would like clarification concerning our origins. Some are saying that it is not possible to fall from being in rasa with Krishna. But that means that Krishna created us and flung us in the material world, which to me sounds cruel. Can I please get something definitive?
Well, in the time we have left, we'll quote from the Shikshashtaka with Caitanya Mahaprabhu, somehow or other, I've fallen into this material ocean. So that's how. We fall somehow or other. We're tatasta. We're not a very significant little flake that can fly in all different directions. I'm not going to get into that explanation right now because it becomes there's a great labor that. Yeah, there's a big purport. Yes. Third canto, 7th chapter. Vidura asked the same question. He's pure spirit soul. So here we go. Bhumi, you started it. Okay, go ahead.
So in the 3rd canto, 7th chapter, which we are reading as part of our Bhakti Vaibhava, Vidura asks the exact same question. Jiva is a pure spirit soul, has no connection with matter. How does he fall into matter?
Mm-hmm.
So that's a good starting point, and Prabhupada has wonderful explanations there. And then we can that's been there addressed in Bhagavatam, so we can take a look at that as a starting point. 2-minute answer to the question.
Oh, you want to look at that right now?
Not right now. You know, for those who want to actually get into that, it's there in Bhagavatam, at least a starting point for a discussion later. They may come back to you for more questions. Okay. Not now, Prabhuji.
All right. Thank you. Last point.
Yeah,
Yes.
I was just thinking about Robin Prabhu's question, like what he asked. And yesterday something happened, like one of my colleagues' last day was there. So then I presented like Bhagavad Gita. Then she immediately asked like and she's following some impersonal path, and they asked like what is the difference between this and this. I told everything is written in the book. So I was thinking how fortunate we have that we have books, so we can give and that clarify all the concepts and everything, and that how you are telling that sincerity brings them to the right path. If they are just sincere, I saw that it was last day, and just 15 minutes before the leaving company, I made and given the book. So I don't know what will happen. That book will do.
Yeah. Nice point.
So last point, that's it.
Yeah?
For stupid people like me, Mahaprabhu's mercy is condensed for the dense.
Condensed for the dense. Okay. Thank you, everyone, for attending online and in person to hear this historic account of the Chaturvyuha and so forth. My apologies to Bhumi and anyone else who I didn't get a chance to go fully into explanations about questions, especially the fall of the jiva. And we'll continue this afterwards and onwards. Vancha kalpadrubhascha kripasinabhevacha patitanam pavanebhyo vaishnavebhyo namo.
Nachariyar marman, nachariyar marman, nachariyar marman, nachariyar marman, hey, nachariyar marman, nachariyar marman, nachariyar marman, nachariyar marman.